when we look at the things that we control, right, it's really tapping into the space of the higher self. It's really understanding that it's our actions, the way we respond, the way we curate our day, that will make a difference in how people around us engage. So one thing that's really, really important to know, that there's a few like ingredients. It's really a few ingredients that really make a difference in how the world around us will respond to us. One of them is this sense of compassion. When we meet other people, right? When we talk about the thought process of kindness, when we engage with other people, for a lot of times we are asking ourselves, and we do this subconsciously, it's like, well, what do I want from this person? Instead of, what does this person need? Where's this person coming from, right? Like their perspective. And when we get offended or hurt, or we judge harshly, a lot of times it's because we're busy with what we need. So I want you all to ask yourselves a question. What is your love language? What is the way that you engage with love? So a couple concepts. So just kind of think about it. There might be something that comes to mind right away. And if not, then take the time in your day to kind of think about it. But I'm going to give you a couple examples here and see if you relate to any of them. And if not, then we can, you can explore it as we move into this breakdown. So some people are like good listeners, right? So they allow the other person to really converse. And that's their way of sharing love. For another person, it can be making a meal. Like you know how to nurture people through feeding them, right? For other people, they do it through humor. And some people are extremely calm. So they bring this like calm energy to the table. So just asking yourselves, what is my way of expressing or supporting somebody else in love, in the sense that this can work in all relationships, not only an intimate relationship. And what's really important to understand is when we tap into these things, we're tapping into the higher consciousness, the higher self. We're not talking about the regular average human that says they don't get love, they don't get enough love, they want love. This is like when we're trying to take control, when we're trying to take control of the situation, when we're trying to step into the adult in our lives rather than the child, right? When we want to step into a much higher frequency, it demands conscious engagement from ourselves and responsibility to start taking control of the way the dominoes fall or the way the room moves. And how we do that is by leaning into ourselves first, standing on our own 2 feet, rather than leaning into somebody else, right? Because for a lot of us, we will bend by command. And this is even in the posture. Notice when you speak to somebody else, do we start, right? Do we start acclimating according to how they talk to us, right? It's something that was really interesting for me this week that might be interesting for all of you is listening, with everything going on around the world, listening to different people commenting on the situation and seeing how easily swayed, like you can sway or nod from side to side with certain things, right? Certain ideas, certain pieces. There's certain things in our life that are pretty finite that our mind doesn't change on. There's certainties, right? And we've done a practice on the certainties. But what's interesting is when there are things we're unsure about, there are things that people can convince us one way or the other. And it could be small little things. So it's interesting to see how that works. But when we stand on our own 2 feet, when we focus on our certainties, and we're standing in our own energy, which is leaning back, leaning straight, rather than leaning forward into somebody else, what we also are doing is creating a really great support for the other person to stand in their own energy too. And our own energy doesn't get leached, right? So it doesn't start leaking out of us. So when we think about energy, if you think about even a plug, like if you think of, a dangerous force of energy would be electric wires that are exposed to the walls, because then the whole room can catch on fire if too much electricity goes through. But a healthy energy current is an energy current that could stand on its own and flow through its own pipeline, right? Through its own wires. And that is so important to know with ourselves, that we are not trying to leak the energy out. We're trying to allow it to charge through us in a healthy manner and not catch fire, right? So when we kind of sit inside of ourselves and we ask ourselves and take responsibility for, like, oh, what am I good at doing, right? What am I good at sharing? How am I good at communicating love to others, rather than what do I need from others? That is going to change. Then the next, so as we go into the ingredients, the first ingredient is kindness. Is really when we are in that space where our pipeline is fully secured, and we are standing in our own grounded energy. When somebody else begins to communicate with us, and communication isn't only in words, right? We just talked about smell, taste, sound, right? The vocal tone. Notice how that person speaks to you, and what they're trying to tell you. So a lot of times the first thing we do is start to judge, rather than notice if that person is going through something. And when somebody is a little bit more aggressive in their tone, are you able to extend some compassion, right? It's the concept of really with midos, like, are you able to extend a little bit of compassion and really kind of give that person a benefit of the doubt, or create just a flow support, where you know that sometimes people have a bad day. And for a lot of us, we spend a lot of time trying to figure things out. So just like we would want somebody to give us a break when we're figuring things out, notice if you're able to give somebody else a break and just don't interrupt their source of consciousness. Now, obviously, if they're actually hurting you, that is, we're not talking about physical harm or emotional harm. But a lot of times people will speculate, they'll run their thoughts through, and they'll want you to hear, and then we take offense, rather than just notice that maybe they're just trying to figure something out. And the way they communicate is to see an avenue where they can get the clarity. So that's that. So the next thing would be the empathy. So after giving them the kindness, it's just giving them, right, extending them that space to just a little bit of empathy in that space where we're empathetic to the human. It's less about us, more about just really focusing on them in that manner. So that's really important. And the next thing is extending some support. For a lot of us, we don't feel we want to do any of this. And the reason is we're like, well, why should I? That person is being X, Y, and Z. But the thing is that if we're trying to change the frequency or break the cycle and step into more of a higher frequency, what this does is it creates an avenue where the other person can be vulnerable with you, right? So a lot of times when people come to the table with a little bit more of a harsh approach, it's a defense, right? And what happens is we are feeling that defense because there's a sense of loneliness and isolation, because they know that the second that they open their mouth, Just like for a lot of us, we feel the moment we open our mouth, we're going to be judged. Everything's going to be recorded, everything's going to be judged, everything's going to be gossiped. And it doesn't create an avenue of vulnerability. So when somebody has the ability to be vulnerable with you, right, that takes them out of the space of isolation. It gives them the sense of community and connection, right? And it can only be done if we start with that first step of genuine kindness. Like, there has to be kindness there has to be. And it's like, well, I'm going to only be kind if that person's going to be kind to me. Why? Then that's when you're not going to have control over your life. That other person will have control because you're giving them all the control. But if you want to change that and you want to make the impact, you have to come to that decision, that conclusion, that finite, that certainty in yourself, and saying, I am running the show here. And what that means is, as you stand in your own energy, and even if somebody else is aggressive or insensitive in what they're trying to convey, we are standing in a space of compassion rather than this kind of fight or flight response where we are always on defense and trying to fight. So when we think about the approach, going back to the beginning where I asked you, what is your approach? If we bring compassion into the approach, where we're like, rather than judgment, I'm going to be super compassionate. I'm going to try to listen and notice those thoughts that come up, right? Now, this is so important because if we don't do this, we do the same. We have such a hostile environment within our own bodies, where not only are we going out to war every single day with others, but we are literally at war with ourselves. And then we don't feel like we have any control, not over our own lives and not over our homes and not over the people in our lives. And again, when we talk about gaining control, it's like, it's as simple as treating your home for a season of winter, right? You have to make sure the windows can close, the heat can be turned on. We control the temperature. We can't control what goes on out there in the sense of somebody else's life by controlling the way they communicate. But we can recognize the power within ourselves and how we can change that dynamic by how we convey and we communicate. So just like we would treat the home and prep it for winter, we can treat that space within by asking ourselves, what is the approach? And you can do this on a day-to-day basis. Even when you go into conversations with people, go into the space of beginning to observe the way you respond. And you can write this on a page, on a piece of paper, put it on the fridge, or even you can even make it like a note on your phone, and ask yourself, how do I respond and communicate with love? And the thing is, people are like, but kindness isn't love. And kindness is a currency for love. So love is like, it's like saying money, right? You can have a lot of money, but if you don't have bracha in the money, right? If there's no like blessing in the money, in the sense of it doesn't have the abundance, money can do a lot of horrible things. And when we think of love in itself, right? People want a lot of love in their life, but they don't realize that there are ingredients to create love in our life. So kindness, compassion, empathy, these are all currencies towards achieving the greater goal of feeling more love in our life. For some of us, we don't know how to connect with the other person. So we will blame others and say, well, I can't get along with them and I can't this. And at the end of the day, for every single one of us, it's essential to know that the relationships in our life are key. The core relationships, which are our family, our friends. Again, there is no perfect solution. There's no perfect solution. Nobody's perfect. But the thing to have in mind is that people do the best they can with what they have, right? So for our parents, some of our family members, they'll do the best they can with what they've taught, what they've been taught, what they've been given. They literally can't do more. It's just not in their ability. But what we can do in our life is know that we can change some of that. We can transform that, right? Not the reactive game, but the active game, right? Making active choices where you are in a space where you are dictating what happens next by really taking responsibility, stepping into the higher self, and knowing that you're living more in an active space rather than a reactive space. And that comes from deep within. So as you move into your day, notice what are some of the ingredients that you could use, right, as currency to connect with the love in your life. Notice where other people can be vulnerable with you, in the sense that when we are our authentic selves, when we drop the guard and the defense, it's like taking the bars off the windows in the concept of interior design. People then all of a sudden know they can be more comfortable with us and be more open with us. And going back to what we talked about a couple weeks ago, that energy is free flowing. It doesn't get stuck. So just as you move into that space, just notice what comes up for you, how it comes up for you. And if you can step into that space where you take control of the situation and you're able to shift the frequency and the energy just by stepping into yourself, just by leaning into your own experience. So thank you so much for joining me today in this experience. I hope you have a beautiful day.